The acrid smell of smoke still clung to Maria's threadbare coat as she stumbled away from the burning apartment building, her lungs screaming for clean air. Her hands, blistered and raw, trembled uncontrollably. Behind her, sirens wailed through the December night. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. People like her, invisible, forgotten, living in the margins, didn't stick around for questions. They didn't wait for gratitude. They survived and they disappeared. But fate, Maria would soon discover, had other plans. 3 days earlier, Maria Santiago had been just another face in the crowd of America's forgotten. At 52, she'd lost everything: her job, her apartment, her dignity, to a series of misfortunes that seemed almost cruel in their precision. A factory closure, medical bills from her daughter's childhood illness that drained every penny, an eviction notice that came faster than she could say, "I'll catch up." Now, she called the streets of Chicago home, her entire world packed into 2 plastic bags and a worn backpack. That Tuesday evening, Maria had found shelter in the doorway of an abandoned storefront, 3 blocks from the rundown Riverside apartments. She was settling in for another freezing night when she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. Not the sirens, not yet, but screaming, raw, terrified screaming that cut through the winter air like a knife. She looked up to see flames licking out of a 3rd-floor window of the apartment building across the street. Thick, black smoke billowed into the darkening sky. People were running out of the building in their nightclothes, some carrying children, others helping elderly neighbors. The chaos was immediate and terrifying. Maria should have stayed put. Every instinct told her to keep her head down, to remain invisible. But then she heard it, a child's cry, distant but desperate, coming from somewhere above the growing commotion. "My baby!" A woman's voice shrieked from the sidewalk. "My baby's still inside?" "3rd floor!" The woman, barely 25, with wild eyes and pajamas, tried to rush back into the building. 2 neighbors held her back as she fought against them, her screams growing more frantic with each passing second. Maria watched the firefighters weren't there yet. Maybe 2 minutes away, maybe 5. But for a child in a burning building, 2 minutes was an eternity. She didn't think. She just moved. Her legs carried her across the street before her mind could catch up. She pushed through the growing crowd of onlookers and made it to the building's entrance. The lobby was filling with smoke, and she could hear the fire raging somewhere above, hungry and relentless. "Lady, you can't go in there!" Someone yelled, but Maria was already gone, climbing the stairs with her coat pressed against her mouth and nose. The 3rd floor was hell. Heat rolled down the hallway in waves, and the smoke was so thick she could barely see 3 feet ahead. She dropped to her knees where the air was clearer and crawled forward, following the sound of a child's coughing. "Where are you, baby?" She called out, her voice hoarse. "Keep making noise." "I'm coming!" A weak cry answered her, and Maria crawled faster, ignoring the way the floor burned through her thin pants, ignoring the way her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. She found the apartment door, 312, partially open. Inside, she could see the orange glow of flames consuming the kitchen. And there, in the far corner of the living room, was a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with dark curls and wide, terrified eyes. She was huddled against the wall, frozen with fear. Maria scrambled to her feet and lunged for the child, scooping her into her arms. The girl clung to her with surprising strength, burying her face in Maria's shoulder. "I've got you," Maria whispered, turning back toward the door. "I've got you, baby." The return journey was harder. The smoke had thickened, and Maria could feel her strength failing. Her vision blurred and her legs felt like lead. But she kept moving, kept crawling with the child pressed against her chest, whispering prayers and promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She didn't remember making it down the stairs. Didn't remember stumbling out of the building just as the firefighters arrived. She only remembered hands taking the child from her arms, voices telling her to breathe, to stay with them. And then, when no one was looking, when the chaos reached its peak, Maria slipped away into the darkness. She walked for blocks, her body on autopilot, until she found another doorway, another temporary refuge. She collapsed there, shaking and coughing, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. She'd saved a life tonight. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it didn't. Either way, by morning, The world would forget she'd ever been there, but the world didn't forget. The next day, footage from a bystander's phone went viral. Grainy and shaky, it showed a homeless woman running into a burning building while everyone else ran out. It showed her emerging minutes later with a child in her arms, then disappearing into the crowd before anyone could thank her. The local news picked it up. Then the national news. Mystery hero saves child, vanishes without a trace, the headlines read. The child's mother, Rachel Morrison, appeared on every news channel, tears streaming down her face, begging for the woman who saved her daughter Emma to come forward. "I need to thank her," Rachel sobbed. "I need her to know that she gave me back my whole world." But Maria, huddled in a public library to escape the cold, didn't see any of it. She had no phone, no computer, no connection to the digital world buzzing with her story. Then came the CEO. James Morrison, Rachel's older brother, was a man who usually made headlines for different reasons. At 41, he'd built Morrison Technologies from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. Forbes called him one of America's most successful self-made entrepreneurs. But when he saw his sister on the news, holding his sobbing niece Emma, describing how a homeless woman had saved her life, something inside him broke open. He dropped everything, canceled board meetings, put executives in charge of his company, and he began searching. James hired private investigators. He walked the streets himself, showing Maria's grainy photo to every shelter, every soup kitchen, every person who looked like they might know the invisible people of Chicago. He offered a reward, not for Maria's capture, but for information that would help him find her to thank her. "This woman," he told reporters who followed his unusual quest, "she had nothing, and she risked everything to save my niece. While people with everything stand by and do nothing, she ran into fire. I need to find her, not to repay her. You can't repay something like that, but to thank her, to see her, to acknowledge that what she did mattered." 5 days after the fire, James found her. Maria was sitting on a bench outside a church, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee from the church's morning outreach. She looked small and tired, her face still bearing the marks of the smoke and heat. When James approached, she didn't recognize him. Why would she? His world and hers never intersected. "Maria Santiago?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. She looked up, confused and wary. "Who's asking?" "I'm James Morrison, Emma's uncle. You saved my niece's life." Maria's eyes widened and she started to stand. "I should go." "Please," James said, his voice cracking. "Please don't go. I've been looking for you for days. My sister has been looking for you. Emma asks about you every night before bed. She calls you her angel." Tears filled Maria's eyes and she sank back onto the bench. "I'm nobody's angel," she whispered. I couldn't leave her in there. I couldn't." "You're a hero," James said firmly. "And I want to help you. Not as charity, but because you deserve so much better than this." What happened next became the part of the story that people shared at dinner tables and in coffee shops across America. James didn't just offer Maria money or a job. He offered her dignity, respect, and a chance to rebuild. He set her up in an apartment, helped her find counseling for the trauma she'd endured, and eventually, when she was ready, gave her a position in his company's community outreach program. Maria's job became finding people like her, invisible, forgotten, worthy, and connecting them with resources, opportunities, and hope. She became the face of a foundation James started in her honor, one that has since helped thousands of homeless individuals find housing and employment. On Emma's 5th birthday, Maria was there, no longer invisible but surrounded by love. As the little girl blew out her candles, she turned to Maria and whispered, "I wish that you could stay forever." Maria pulled her close, tears streaming freely now. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." And she meant it, because sometimes the most broken among us become the most powerful examples of what it means to be human. Sometimes one act of selfless courage is enough to change not just one life, but hundreds. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world remembers to see the people it's trained itself to overlook. Maria Santiago taught James Morrison and countless others a truth that money and success had obscured: that humanity isn't measured by what you have, but by what you're willing to give when you have nothing left to give. Her story reminds us all that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they carry plastic bags and sleep in doorways. and they run into fire when everyone else runs out. Because at the end of the day, saving a life matters more than saving yourself. That's the kind of human being Maria was before the fire. During the fire and after. The only difference now is that the world finally sees her.